Good morning, everyone. I'm Ankit, and you're watching the Indian Express analysis for 4th of February. I know many days have been spent since we have analyzed the newspaper, but please understand that the analysis for budget and economic survey takes a lot of effort. It also needs to be done separately so as to segregate it from the news articles, because our original intention is to provide you with the very detailed analysis of budget and economic survey without any opinions by the newspaper, because we are presenting you the information and you have to write that information directly into the exam. So please rely on the individual videos that we have put up. Now, if you have still haven't watched the Indian of the budget discussion and the economic survey, we have created a separate playlist here, which you can see, budget and economic survey 2025 view full playlist. There are important videos, union budget discussion, economic survey, also a video that we have uploaded which you need to understand or you need to watch before watching the budget discussion videos, because it helps you put things in perspective of what are the constitutional requirements that impose or that makes it mandatory for the government to present budget on a yearly basis. So all of these are important for your exams perspective. So please watch these videos after the session ends if you haven't already. Now let me remove the ads here. Yes. As I was saying, let us move back to our discussion now. Now, I know many of the articles were left out in the process since we were discussing in detail the budget and economic survey. So let me tell you, everything will be done accordingly. I have picked up many articles from 1st of February, 3rd of February's newspaper to cover today, and important articles also from today's newspaper are covered today. And even if some of the articles must have been left out, I will make sure to cover them in the succeeding days. So please make sure or please understand there will be nothing that will be left out of today's newspaper. So in Hindi they say na, सब कुछ शांति पूर्वक तरीके से होगा. That means everything will be covered very peacefully. Understood? Now let us move to our today's article. We will discuss 7 important articles in today's newspaper and also from the newspapers from 1st, 3rd and 4th of February. We'll start first of all with 2 drugs. These have been in news because of policy changes in the United States. One is an alternative of a non-opioid drug called as Suzetrigine, and another one is an opioid drug called as Fentanyl. And both of these are in news because US President Donald Trump has highlighted these drugs as a menace to American society, and also because these drugs are supplied into US market by immigrant population, particularly the ones who are hailing from Mexico and also from China. So we'll understand the details regarding these 2 drugs, how they are different and what are their side effects, etc. on the society and also on human health. And these are important from GS paper 3 perspective because it deals with matters of science and technology. So we'll be understanding these 2 articles separately. Also, we'll start discussing a VSHORAD missile system which was tested recently by DRDO, as it is a man-portable air defense system which allows the soldier to fire a missile onto an incoming aerial object. So we'll also understand how these missiles are very portable and enables the Indian Armed Forces to deal with aerial threats quite effectively. Also, this is important from GS paper 3 syllabus, which is given in both internal security and also science and tech. So these will be the discussion for today. Also, we'll be dealing about the conflict that is occurring in the Democratic Republic of Congo and how it is resulting into a regional dispute and regional disturbances into the Central African area. Because Democratic Republic of Congo, which is very different from Congo, it is a country located in the central part of Africa, and the conflict, which is essentially an ethnic conflict that is taking place, has the potential to disturb the entire region, which you can understand is an already disturbed region. Also, 5th article will be dealing with PM Dhan-Dhaanya Krishi Yojana, which was announced in this year's budget, and it has also been covered extensively in the newspapers and also on the website of the Indian Express. So what are the important features of this scheme? What are the funding through which the government will provide for the scheme? We'll understand this, and this is important from GS paper 3 syllabus because it deals with the matters related to India's agricultural sector. Also, the 6th article deals with the rate simplification for goods and services tax, abbreviated as GST. As we understand, the government in its recent budget simplified or rationalized the income tax regime. Now there are demands for similar simplification for indirect tax regime, that is the GST. So we'll understand this, what are the debates or why people want to rationalize GST after all, even though the fact that GST is making a lot of money for both union and state governments. Also, this is a part of government budgeting, hence it is important from GS paper 3 perspective, that is a part of economy syllabus. Then towards the end, we'll be dealing with the need for a separate law for domestic workers, as the India Supreme Court highlighted or directed the union government to pass a legislation that should regulate the working conditions for domestic workers in India. Because we know domestic workers, they are present in each and every houses. They are responsible for managing a lot of household work, but you also have to understand they are not provided with any kind of income, social security, etc. And that makes it a vulnerable section, which is a part of GS paper 2 syllabus and also a part of society and social justice. So we'll be dealing in detail the need or why is there a need for separate law for domestic workers before concluding our today's session. Now, as usual, you know the notes of this session will be available on my Telegram channel called as ATS Live. So you can search the words ATS Live on the top right corner of your mobile app for Telegram. Or also, if you're not able to find the channel, please make sure to scan this QR code. And this is the channel where I upload important notes for the sessions. And I also take your feedback on how to improve the sessions. Now, good morning, Bulbul. Good morning, Sojanya. Good morning, FTY. Good morning, Baga Springs. Baga Springs joins us after a lot of day. I'm still missing out some of the usual suspects like Kalpana and Amar, etc. So I'm looking so that they can join the session soon. Now, let us start with the rather 31st of January's practice question that I gave you as a homework with reference to the properties of ethanol. Consider the following statements. Now, ethanol is a volatile, flammable liquid that is completely miscible with petrol. What do I mean with miscible? Miscible means a substance that mixes with another substance without any problem. So that is the property called miscibility. Now, ethanol, you know, is miscible with petrol and hence these are blended with petrol to reduce the emissions of normal gasoline or petrol. So, first statement here is correct. Second statement, ethanol has a higher octane number, which is correct actually, than petrol, which reduces engine's performance and results into higher knocking. Now, you have to understand any fuel which has a higher octane number improves the performance of engines by reducing the properties of knocking. So, higher the octane number, better is the performance and lesser is the knocking potential of that fuel. So, first part of the statement although was correct, however, this second part which says that it reduces engine performance and results into higher knocking is actually an incorrect statement. So, all in all, second statement becomes incorrect, first was right and we had to identify correct statement. So, option A here is the right answer. No problem, Baga Springs. Good that you're catching up today. Good morning, Revolutionaries IS Academy. Very good morning to you. Now, this is the mains question that I will be taking up before the end of the session. And as you can understand, the detailed article that we are going to discuss today is on the need for domestic workers and a need for regulating them through a different legislation. So, you'll be understanding this or will be trying to solve this question after we are going through the articles. So please stay tuned if you want to know how to write such mains answer which are very important from our mains answer writing perspective. So let us start our today's discussion with the first article of the day. This article actually appeared on the 1st of February in the explain section of the Indian Express, and it states that the US FDA, it has given an approval to a drug called as Suzetrigine, which is a non-opioid painkiller and it is developed by a private company. So yeah, what is important from this article's perspective is actually what are the properties of this non-opioid drug called Suzetrigine. So let us try to understand this. First of all, what are opioids in general? Now, opioids are a class of drugs which are either chemically manufactured or are naturally derived from opium poppy plants. Now, these kind of drugs, they have a property that they numb your senses by binding onto your opioid receptors, and by binding to your opioid receptors, what they do is they block the pain signals that our nerves send to our brains, and because they block the pain signals, it releases the sense of pleasure and euphoria while numbing down the pain. So that is why these kind of drugs are extensively used in the medical sector after the surgery, so that the patients, they are relieved from the pain as a result of surgery. Now there are many common opioids that are available in the market. These are oxydone, morphine, heroin, fentanyl. However, their delivery to the healthcare centers are very regulated. Now, these euphoric effect that these drugs create, it is very highly addictive, and it often leads to a person's becoming dependent on these drugs, and often leads to their misuse in common public even after they have treated for their medical condition. So that is why regulating such kind of a drugs is very necessary for any country, be it India or be it US. Now this kind of a situation is quite drastic in US, because in US there were about 82,000 opioid drugs related overdose deaths in the year 2022, and these are official figures of the United States government. Also, US in general, it consumes 30 times more opioid medication than what is necessary. So understand that misuse and overuse and even overdose of such drugs are a big problem in US market. And in 2017 also, when President Trump was serving his first tenure as the president, he declared this as a public health emergency and called it as a national shame. That it was such a matter of national shame that US citizens, they were dependent on such addictive drugs. So that is why the US president, they are trying to regulate and even control the amount of opioids that are available in the market. And as a result, the today's article which says that a non-opioid drug which has a similar properties has been introduced. So that is why such kind of a drugs are very significant, and it is called as Suzetrigine. Now this Suzetrigine, it targets pain signals even before they reach our brain, which is very unlike the opioid, which alters the sense of pain perception. So these they quite work differently from the opioid based drugs. Now these kind of drugs, they interrupt the pain pathway to the nerve level, which prevents our brain from recognizing the pain even before the tissue or even the tissue, or there is a damage to the tissue. So this kinds of prevents the signal from reaching the brains, and hence it prevents a person to feel pain as a result of damage to their tissue. Now let us try to understand how this drug Suzetrigine, it is different from opioid based drugs. Now in basis of actions, these opioids, they block pain signals into the brain, whereas the Suzetrigine, it interrupts pain signals even before they reach the brain. When it comes to the vulnerability or chances of getting addicted to it, in case of opioids, it is quite high, as they cause euphoria and pleasure. So people, even after they are getting treated, they are getting hooked to these kind of drugs, and they consume these drugs just to get the feeling of euphoria and pleasure. Whereas the same cannot be said about drugs like Suzetrigine, because they are not very addictive, as they do not trigger any kind of pleasure. Whereas on the other hand, in terms of side effects, there are addiction, overdose risk and respiratory issues in cases of opioids. Whereas on the other hand, in cases of Suzetrigine, it is expected to be safer, because there are less chances of persons getting addicted to it. However, there is one detrimental side effect, that it is actually very costly in nature. So poor and vulnerable people, they actually won't be able to afford these kind of drugs, and naturally they will be using these kind of opioids to numb the senses of pain. So that is why there key differences between Suzetrigine, which is a non-opioid drug, and other opioid-based drugs like fentanyl, morphine, etc. Now, closely related to this article is another article which appeared in today's newspaper, similarly on the explained section, and that is why we are covering these two articles in togetherness. Now, as I told you, this article, that is today's article, it appeared into the newspaper because recently US President Trump imposed tariffs on many countries, which included Canada, Mexico and China. And while doing so, the US government, it cited that extraordinary threat that are posed by illegal migrants into US, particularly that they are using or they are delivering the drugs called as fentanyl into the US market. And from many years now, the US, it has raised concern over inflow of fentanyl. Primarily, these chemicals, these are manufactured in China, and through the routes of Mexico, they are smuggled into US and sold to the people of US. And these are sold primarily by immigrants from Mexico. So in addition to a social problem, it is also a political problem for US. But we'll not be dealing into political details. We'll be understanding details about what is actually fentanyl and how it is different from the Suzetrigine that we covered in last article. Now, fentanyl, it is a potent synthetic opioid. So, it is not a naturally occurring opioid, but it is a chemical based drug which mimics the properties of opioid based drugs, as it serves as an analgesic which relieves the pain, and also as an anesthetic. That is, if a person is undergoing surgery, we want to numb his or her senses, we can administer drugs like fentanyl and morphine. And there are other opioids also, oxydone, morphine, heroin, etc., and they cause euphoria and pain relief, but also they are very highly addictive, as I told you in the last article. Now, why is fentanyl very different from other opioids like morphine and heroin? Because fentanyl, it is 100 times stronger than morphine and 50 times more potent than heroin. So people or who are consuming drugs, they prefer fentanyl because of its higher potency and effectiveness. Now, this effectiveness is also cause of worry because it can pose significant health risk. As you can see, overdoses can cause pupil size to change, even cause cyanosis, which is actually a blue skin due to lack of oxygen, and also respiratory failure, which can even lead to death. Also, it is very highly addictive in nature as they provide instant pain relief. However, they also came up with an effect of euphoria. And because of this euphoria, whenever the effect of these drugs wear off, people want to get that kind of feeling again, and hence they overconsume such kind of drugs, which leads to their addiction. And many people, they get hooked to these drugs after they are into a medical facility, and they are administered by such kind of opioids, and after they've discharged from the hospital, they still look to get this kind of feeling just by sourcing these drugs from the private market and from the smugglers. And that is why it is such a big problem in US, as I told you already. Now, based on these two articles, let us now try to solve our first practice question for the day. Consider the following statements regarding opioids and fentanyl. Opioids are a class of drug that include both natural and synthetic substances primarily used for pain relief. Yes, it is correct. These are both chemical and natural based substances. Now, fentanyl, it is a naturally occurring opioid derived directly from opium poppy. Now, it is incorrect. It is heroin that is derived directly from opium poppy. Rather, fentanyl is a chemical substance which mimics the properties of an opioid or a naturally occurring opium based product. Now, the third, the misuse of opioids like fentanyl has contributed to a global rise in opioid related overdose death. Yes, it is correct. Second was incorrect, first and third are correct, and we had to identify correct statement. Therefore, option C here is the right answer. Baga-Spinks, is it classified as a drug pandemic, sir? Actually, Baga-Spinks, there is no such term as drug pandemic by WHO. So even if some government can classify it as a drug pandemic, however, legality, in terms of legality, it will have no different effect than other kind of drug related abuse. So understood. So these kind of words, these are used by governments to make people aware actually by the fact that these are so dangerous to human beings. Understood? Now, moving to the third article, this article actually appeared in the page 16 of yesterday's newspaper, and it highlights that DRDO, it has carried out 3 extensive tests of a very short range air defense system, which is also abbreviated as VSHORAD missile system. Now, this test actually happened in a DRDO's test location located in Chandipur coast of Odisha, and that is why such kind of a test are important from a prelims perspective, because important defense platforms, technologies, they've always been a subject of interest for UPSC and also are asked in the prelims examination. So please make sure to follow such kind of articles whenever we discuss it on a daily basis. Now, moving to this article, this VSHORAD missile system is actually a 4th generation man-portable air defense system. Now, these man-portable air defense system like EAGLA, these are also abbreviated as MANPADS. And this particular VSHORAD missile, it was developed by a laboratory of DRDO called as Research Center Imarat, located in the city of Hyderabad. Now, this kind of a missile system, it is designed extensively to neutralize aerial targets, be it planes, helicopters, or even drones. So you can understand these kind of weapons, they are very effective in dealing with aerial threats which have emerged as the biggest threat to any defense forces like Indian Army, Indian Air Force, etc. So soldiers, they need to be equipped with such kind of equipments to make them safer and also make our army much more effective in dealing with aerial threats and threats that are emerging from other countries, such as even their armies and non-state actors like terrorist organizations. Now, there are significant advantages of such kind of a system. First of all, it is very lightweight in nature, so a person can easily carry it around whenever they are deployed in a particular area. It is highly maneuverable, so you can even change the target depending on whether the aerial target is approaching from you from which side. Also, it provides a pinpoint accuracy which enables an effective and very efficient way of destructing the aerial targets. Also, it is capable of hitting targets with the reduced thermal signatures, so even stealth aircrafts, technically they can be taken down by such kind of air defense systems or weapons. Understood? Now, let us move to another article. This article actually appeared also in yesterday's Explain section, and it highlights that a conflict is actually going on in a Democratic Republic of Congo, which is located in the Central Asia. Now, this Democratic Republic of Congo, it is witnessing a conflict between M23 rebels, which is actually backed by a neighboring country called Rwanda, and this has actually intensified into the eastern portion of the DRC, also known as Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, Democratic Republic of Congo is a country located in central part of Africa, and it is surrounded by 9 different countries. So please remember this map. These are 9 important countries that borders the Democratic Republic of Congo. You can look into the map once I upload the notes in my Telegram channel after the session ends. Now, moving back to let us try to understand some details about DRC, as this place is in news. So you can expect a question on map based or even a fact based on this particular country. Now, as I told you, there are 9 bordering countries which include these countries, and Democratic Republic of Congo, it is different from Congo, which is located on the eastern part of DRC. DRC rather is the second largest country in Africa, which makes it a significant country. What is the largest country in Africa? It is Algeria, which is located into the northwest part of the Africa. Now, DRC, it is known to be rich in minerals such as cobalt, gold, and as well as coltan. Now, coltan is used extensively in the manufacturing of the electronics such as mobile phones, and the supply of coltan is very essential, and the M23, in order to finance their rebel against the government of Democratic Republic of Congo, they are cornering the significant supplies of coltan, which provides them with the revenue which they can use for fighting purposes. Also, the important rivers that flow through DRC, these are known as Congo River. It is actually Africa's second longest river. And also the capital city of DRC is known as Kinshasa, which is also located on the banks of Congo River. So these are the important facts that you have to understand about Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, moving to the rebel or the kind of conflict. Now, this conflict, particularly from the UPSC perspective, is not that important, but I'm giving you a brief idea of how this conflict is going on, so you can relate to any future article if it appears in the newspaper. For example, this conflict is actually started back in 2012 when about 300 soldiers belonging to the DRC's National Army, called as FARDC, they mutinied against the very violence that was perpetuated by the National Army of DRC. Now, this M23 rebel group, it operates in the eastern region of Democratic Republic of Congo, specifically in the North Kivu province, which is located in this part of DRC. And this is the eastern part of DRC, which borders the area of Rwanda and Uganda. Also, the name M23 actually comes from the March 23 agreement, which was signed between the Congolese government and the National Congress Defense of People, which was a rebel group that ultimately became the M23 group. Now, this M23 group, it primarily it is comprised of ethnic Tutsis, and they are fighting to protect Tutsis' interest against the violence committed by Hutu militias, who are, in their opinion, supported by the Democratic Republic of Congo's National Army. And the organization of these Hutu militias are known as Democratic Forces for Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR. So there are two sides in this conflict. First is the FDLR, which is supported by the army of DRC, and on the other side it is M23 group which is supported by Rwanda. Understood the conflict? Now, there are accusations on involvement of Rwanda in the conflict, as according to the DRC's government, Rwanda is actively supporting by providing them with finances and munitions to the M23 group to undertake or to protect themselves from the violence committed by Hutu militias. Now, Rwanda's support has been criticized by Congolese government as well as Western powers like US, and they say that it is the Rwanda's government which is deploying troops and heavy weapons in support of M23 rebel, and this has a potential to destabilize the entire Central African region. And on the other hand, the Rwanda government in their defense are saying that actually we are defending the rights of Tutsis by supporting the M23 group, so that these M23 group, they can prevent the bodies like FDLR to commit violence against the Tutsis community, and FDLR represents the interest of which community? Hutu community. Understood? So that is why this is the cause of why the conflict is brewing in the region of Democratic Republic of Congo, particularly eastern region of DRC. Now let us try to solve a question that has been curated very closely to a PYQ. Among the following, which of the frequently mentioned in the news for the fight to protect interest of ethnic Tutsis recently? Is it Syria and Jordan? No, it is not. Is it Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia? It is not. Is it Ethiopia, Sudan and South Sudan? No, it is actually Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda which are in news. So option C here is the right answer to this question. I see Baga, Spinks and Bulbul, they've already marked C, so actually very good for your participation. Now, if you're liking this session, please make sure to like the video by giving us a thumbs up, as it helps us keep motivated, and also, by the way, algorithm of YouTube works, it helps our content reach more aspirants like you. And we want to do this kind of a video as a social service because we understand analyzing the current affairs is a very important aspect which many students, they often miss out on. So we are undertaking this kind of an hard work on a daily basis so that you get a kind of an analysis of the newspaper, and it helps you save time and also money in undertaking various different courses. Understood? Now, you also have an option in watching this video on our website. The link for the course is provided here, and the benefits of registering for this course, which is just available at 1 rupee, are many. First of all, you will be provided with PPT lectures and notes on the website itself. You will have an option to download this video for offline viewing, and also you can try to learn the process of analyzing the newspapers by solving the interactive MCQs which are also available in the portal. Understood? Now, yes, Bulbul, you're right. FTY also right. Option C is right. Yes. Now, moving on to the next article. This article actually appeared in the Indian Express newspaper and also on the website. Now, I've taken the snapshot from the website. It also appeared in the newspaper, I guess, on 2nd of February, which was Sunday. Now, this article highlights that the finance minister, in her union budget speech, she brought a new scheme for the India's agricultural sector called as Pradhan Mantri Dhan-Dhaanya Yojana. So let us try to understand the various important aspects of this scheme as it was introduced in this year's budget. Now, this scheme actually is motivated by an earlier scheme of the government of India called as Aspirational Districts Program. Now, in this Aspirational Districts Program, what government did is that it identified 112 most underdeveloped and backward districts in India, and it undertook a pointed effort so as to make these districts much better in terms of livable, in terms of development of their population. So, similar concept now is applicable on the agricultural sector also now. That government will target 100 districts in India who have a low agricultural productivity, who have a moderate crop intensity, and also farmers in these areas have a below average credit access. So, farmers and the agricultural activity that are going on in these 100 districts are actually subpar, and the intention of the government is actually to prosper agricultural sector in these districts by boosting agricultural productivity, promoting crop diversification, and also supporting sustainable agricultural practices which will not just make the crops more resilient to climate change, but it will also reduce the cost incurred by the farmers in growing these crops. So this is the ultimate aim of the government, to transform the agricultural sector in the backward 100 districts who have a backward agricultural practices and productivity and yield. Understood? Now, the key features of this scheme, it includes construction of post-harvest storage infrastructure, as warehousing infrastructure will be constructed in panchayats and block levels, and it will allow farmers to store their produce for longer duration, and after the prices of these commodities are high, the farmers can sold these crops into the market, and as a result of storage, they will not be required to sell these crops immediately after harvesting. Further, irrigation facilities will be provided, as better access to irrigation facility increases the yield and productivity of agriculture, and as these districts are backward, so you can expect that these districts, they do not have an adequate level of irrigation facility. Also, credit availability will be facilitated from formal sources like banks and NBFCs, both for short term and long term needs of farmers. Short term needs include purchasing inputs or for their consumption needs, whereas long term needs actually includes construction of infrastructure, which is a capital investment in agriculture, and government is looking to provide all kinds of formal financing. Further, beneficiaries, it is expected that this scheme will benefit 1.7 crore farmers in the country, and it will alleviate their concerns for low productivity and low income. And also, in terms of budget allocation, no separate budget has been allocated to the scheme. Rather, convergence of existing schemes of the government will take place, which will divert the resources from these schemes into these 100 districts. And as a result, by divergence and implementation of already existing schemes, it will lead to supply of benefits to as many beneficiaries as 1.7 crore farmers. Understood? Now let us try to solve this practice question. Consider the following statements regarding Prime Minister Dhan-Dhaanya Krishi Yojana. The scheme targets 100 districts with highest agricultural productivity and crop intensity. Actually, it is incorrect. These districts have the lowest or very low amount of agricultural productivity and not highest. So first statement incorrect. Second statement, this scheme has a dedicated budget allocated separate from existing agricultural scheme. Also, this is incorrect. As I told you, there is no dedicated budget. Rather, existing schemes, they will be diverged and converged into the aspirational districts or these 100 districts, which will supply resources to the farmers under this district. So second statement also incorrect. First was incorrect. We had to identify correct statement. So neither 1 nor 2 is the right answer. Therefore, option D is correct. Now moving to next article, this also appeared in yesterday's newspaper on page 17, and this article actually highlights that the GST rate simplification should happen. And why this article appeared in news? Because actually the government of India in its budget, particularly given by Madam Finance Minister, she highlighted that government has actually announced rationalization and simplification of income tax regime. And there are similar demands for rationalization and simplification of indirect tax regime, which is represented by GST or goods and services tax. Now, this demand actually is going on, and actually it is the exclusive news of Indian Express, Khufiya Khabar, that discussions between center and states have actually taken place to undertake not just GST rate rationalization, but also to simplify the structure with a particular focus on doing away with the 12% slab. Now, what is the GST regime? It is an indirect tax regime which aims to simplify the indirect tax system in India. And once it was implemented back in 2017, it was expected that instead of various taxes which were levied by various state governments, instead there will be one GST, that is a one nation tax for the entire nation. But rather in application, you understand, right? It is not right for us to tax milk with a similar rate of tax on cigarettes, because milk is something which is very good for you. It is consumed on a daily basis in every household in India. Whereas on the other hand, items like cigarette, these are very harmful for human health. So these are taxed alternatively or at a very higher tax so as to discourage their consumption. Whereas daily use items like bread and milk, they are taxed at a very low rate or even sometimes zero taxation rates. So that is why the country, even after the GST was introduced, it required different tax rates for different products, and as a result the GST regime, it has resulted into a multi-tier tax structure that has taxes of 0% tax, 5% tax, 12% tax, 18% and 28% tax. Now there are additional levies and cesses which are implemented on sin goods and luxury items like cigarettes, etc., which are subjected to higher tax even after 28%. So as a result, because of presence of multiple tax rates, it is a multi-tiered structure. And intention of the government now is to actually rationalize this multi-tier structure, that is combining two or three rates into one particular rate. Now, as a result, to suggest simplification and how this simplification should happen, a ministerial panel was formed under the GST regime, and it wanted to undertake rate rationalization. Now, this ministerial panel, it held discussions on what items and what kind of slabs should be rationalized and what kind of items should be moved from one tax rate to another tax rate. However, even after holding various kind of discussion, this ministerial panel still suggested that the 12% GST panel or GST slab should be retained. So according to today's article, it is highlighting that this was not the purpose of the ministerial panel, that they should not have recommended retaining the 12% GST slab rate. Rather, they should have implemented, or they should have recommended of doing away with this 12% slab rate. So as a result, another ministerial panel has been formed whether or not to remove the 12% slab rate. Now, there is another discussion going on that instead of 12% and 18% GST, why doesn't government remove both of them and instead apply one GST of 15%? However, it is also important to note that is merging two different slabs, that is 12 and 18%, into one slab of 15% will eventually lead to a revenue loss for the government. And why am I saying so? Because around 70 to 75% of GST revenue, it is cornered by items which are present in 18% slab, whereas only 5 to 6% of revenue is cornered by items mentioned in 12% rate. So when you remove 18% rate and 12% rate and instead bring 15% of GST rate, so it will mean that about 70 to 75% of revenue which is cornered by 18% slab, it will be reduced because you are now implementing a lesser tax on these many products, whereas lesser amount of products will be taxed at a higher rate. So the compensation of revenue loss actually will not happen. So this is the demand why government is actually not implementing this 115% tax rate instead of replacing it with 12 and 18% tax rate. Also, there is one other important caveat that by bringing higher rate of 12% and changing it to 15%, it will impose higher taxation burden on certain pharmaceutical items, which will again go against the public interest. So this is the problem that the GST regime is facing, that although both central and state governments want to rationalize the GST structure, however, they are not coming to a conclusion on how and when to rationalize this. So this is an ongoing development. We will cover this news if there are any new developments in the newspaper. Now, moving to the last article of the day. This article actually appeared in the page 12 of yesterday's newspaper, and the subject of this article actually is that the Supreme Court of India, it has directed the Union government to explore the possibility of enacting a separate law for domestic workers. Now, domestic workers, they are present in each and every household in India. Even you, if you are living in other places like Delhi, you must be enlisting their services so as to undertake cleaning of your house or even to prepare food for you. And these domestic workers, they are actually very vulnerable in nature. So because of their vulnerability, this topic becomes important from GS paper 2 perspective, because if you look at the syllabus, there are topic given as vulnerable section, and domestic workers, they are a part of vulnerable section of Indian society, and hence we are discussing this article from the GS paper 2 perspective. Now, I told you the development, right? The Supreme Court of India, it has actually directed the Union government, because currently there are no laws that regulate the working conditions of domestic workers, and that makes them at quite vulnerable stage. And rather, the Supreme Court wants now that the Union government should enact a law to regulate the working condition. Understood? Now, in this regard, let us understand what are the challenges faced by domestic workers in India. First of all, these domestic workers, as there are no act applicable to them, they face lack of legal protection. As other workers, they are subjected to provisions of articles like Minimum Wages Act, as they are provided with a minimum wage, whereas Equal Remuneration Act mandates the government or any body to pay equally to both man and women. So this kind of a legislation or regulation, it is not applicable on domestic workers, as they are excluded from key labor laws, and that is why they are not even paid minimum wages and they are not paid equally as compared to male workers. So this is the first threat or first challenge that domestic workers face. Another challenge is that this is primarily a feminized occupation. A significant amount of domestic workers in India, even if you look by your own eyes and experience, you'll notice that most of them are women and they belong to migrant communities, especially the marginalized communities. And once they are working at some other place which is not their native place, they are originally vulnerable, and when they are exposed to lesser wages and not an equal amount of remuneration, that makes them even more vulnerable. And especially when they are women, they are exposed to other kind of risks also, that makes them a very vulnerable section. Also, there are high wage disparities and poor working conditions that these women or domestic workers face. First of all, they are subjected or they are provided with low wages. Their job is actually not insecure, that whenever they do some kind of a misstep in their work, the employers say that please don't come from tomorrow. So that kind of job insecurity and low wages, it puts them at risk of significant social risk. Also, there is absence of social security which are available to other kind of formal workers. As formal workers, whenever they are getting salaries from their companies, they are also entitled to some kind of benefits like PF, gratuity, pension, etc. once they retire. But such kind of social security and healthcare services, they are not provided to domestic workers, which makes them very socially vulnerable lot. Also, in many times during festivals and in times when guests have arrived at your home, there are significant increased workloads on these domestic workers. However, as against increased workload, they are not paid anything extra for their work. So instead of providing extra compensation, what people do is they just thank them. So thanking them is not the solution, right? That person is working at your house to earn livelihood. So instead of thanking them, why don't you thank them by providing them with extra compensation, right? So this is the kind of challenges that these domestic workers face. Also, these domestic workers, they are very negatively perceived socially and they face workplace issues, as their work which they are doing for earning livelihood, it is actually perceived as a natural skill for women, and naturally and mostly women are employed for these kind of workers, and employers, they often mistreat workers. As we have seen in the news, that there are many instances that employers even have gone to an extent of committing violence against these domestic workers. So you're not just providing them with adequate money, but you're also misbehaving with them, which puts them at significant social risk. Also, there are legal recognition issues, as India has not ratified the ILO Convention 189, which mandates protection or extension of protection to the domestic workers, and even the past judicial interventions that have mandated registering of placement agencies, that have not actually been very effective in nature. So these are the challenges that the domestic workers face. Now let us try to understand, why is there actually a need to bring a separate legislation? Why is there any existing legislation that covers domestic worker? The answer is no, because despite arguments of no labor codes which theoretically covers domestic workers, but you have to understand, code on wages of 2019, it actually covers domestic work, but it does not address the unique complexities that the domestic workers face. First of all, you have to understand that these domestic workers, they are employed in full-time, part-time, or even in live-in or live-out basis. So in that case, is the regulation, that is code on wages, it does not differentiate whether the person is employed on a full-time or on a part-time basis. Or also you have to realize that these domestic workers, at once they work in many homes. So what kind of a home actually will provide for significant social benefits? These are not given in the existing laws. Also, the private nature of domestic work, it creates an asymmetry of power between the employers that are households and the employees that are domestic workers. So these kind of regulation of private nature of domestic workers, the existing legislation, they are very ineffective in that regard. So that is why we need a separate legislation that understands the needs of domestic workers, that understands the vulnerability of domestic workers, and accordingly provides safety and security to these people. Now, there are certain suggestions that have been given in the article. Let us try to look at it. First, the article states that there is a need for clear and inclusive definition of domestic work, as you need to segregate that if the domestic worker is working full-time or on a part-time basis, and what kind of works are actually covered under domestic work, and you have to provide an inclusive and an exhaustive definition so that it covers the maximum amount of domestic workers in India as it is possible. Also, the proof of employment is actually a major hurdle, as the workers, even after they have faced certain kind of issues at their workplaces, once they report to the formal agencies like law enforcement agencies, they are unable to prove that they actually worked in that place, because these employees, they are not providing with pay slips, right? Or they are not transferring the money with UPI or any formal banking, rather they give out them cash. So that is why these workers, they are not able to prove that they were actually employed in that place that committed a crime against them. So actually, in order to do away with this problem, many worker unions, they have advocated for mandatory employer registration of workers, which will actually ensure compliances for various provisions like minimum wage, that once you have registered your domestic worker on a portal, you will be mandated to provide them with some kind of a minimum wage and also some kind of social and economic security. Further, minimum entitlements and redressal mechanism should also be dealt with by a new law, as it will challenge the existing power hierarchies and also prove a mechanism so that these workers, once they face certain kind of problems, they can refer to these mechanisms so as to get their problems redressed. Also, by proposing a national law, we can take into account by regional and local conditions, and accordingly even the states, they can modify that national law and suit their own regional and local circumstances. And in that case, the article states that we need to study the similar laws which have been passed by states like Kerala and Delhi, and such national law should incorporate best case studies that have been implemented in Kerala and Delhi. Understood? So this is how the government can approach by bringing a new legislation on domestic workers, as it will alleviate their socio and economic purposes or shortcomings. Understood? Now let us try to solve this practice question. The absence of comprehensive legislation to safeguard the rights of domestic workers in India, it has led to continued vulnerability of exploitation. Analyze the need for dedicated law to protect workers' rights and also suggest measures to ensure social security. Now you will begin your answer with an introduction, and you will highlight that news articles in general, they highlight that there are instances of violence that happen against domestic workers. So this is how you will try to set up your answer. Now the second portion of your body, and you will also highlight that these domestic workers, they are not subjected to any important legislation as far as current point. So these are the 2 points that you will highlight. First is violence, second is no legislation is actually applicable to them. Now your body will actually consist of 3 parts. First will be the challenges that you will enumerate, and actually you can write these challenges that I have given here in detail: lack of legal protection, feminization of occupation, wage disparity and poor working condition, social perception and workplace issue, as well as legal recognition issue. Whereas the second part of your answer will highlight the need for such article, as you will say that the existing laws such as code on wages although cover domestic workers, but it does not differentiate between the various or differing natures of their work. And also the another need, as I told you, that the private nature of domestic work, it actually makes enforcement difficult. So these are the 2 arguments that you can say that highlights the need for a different legislation. And in the end, you will write that you will try to summarize the future directions that I have given you. That try to summarize that there is a need for national law that has inclusive definition. It should provide redressal mechanism so that the grievance workers, they should get their grievances redressed by some kind of a mechanism. So this actually summary, it will constitute the conclusion of your answer, and try to summarize these suggestions into 3 to 4 line max if you want to conclude your answer with this, right? So please attempt this answer writing, and also if you have any problem, please refer to this Telegram channel, as you can submit your answers and also use this QR code to reach to the channel. And this, before ending this session, this question is your homework. Please try to solve this question and accordingly comment in the comment section. Now also there is a genuine request for those who are watching, Please comment even after the video ends, and do not forget to give us a thumbs up, as it will appreciate our hard work and it will also appreciate the work that we are doing you to provide the daily analysis of newspapers. So I'll see you again tomorrow at 10 a.m. sharp. Until then, please keep reading, keep analyzing, and more importantly, keep writing those answers.